welcome to my channel. But I'm going to be doing an extended review on the new Partypooper Diary of a Wimpy book. It's actually fairly good so far, but I'm going to give you a full extended review on it. So I hope you enjoy, and subscribe. So generally speaking, the main topic that's rolling around is what is the plot. So the plot of this book, I can clearly tell you by the back of the cover and what I've read, is about Greg Heffley. You know who Greg Heffley is, and he throws a surprise party for himself. When Greg's epic party plans start to unravel, he holds out hope that he'll get on his one birthday wish, a rare trading card that's worth a fortune. I have not gotten to that yet, but I can tell you based off of this book, it's actually really good. And to dive into the plot is not really intense like others. Like sometimes, like in The Getaway, it will get towards the end, it will get suspenseful, which I love about The Getaway. And the only book that I have not, Diary of a Wimpy book that I have not really read is The Meltdown. I just got this today. But The Meltdown is a really, I've heard is a really good book, but I haven't read it yet. So anyway, I'll be back on topic. I've heard that the plot is also really good in this one. But anywho, Partypooper seems to have a lot of like kind of style into it. So like it has the comedy, and that's kind of what I love about it. Is we haven't had a lot of comedic parts in books. We haven't really had a lot of comedic parts from like 14 through 19 of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. So we have a pretty good standard plot. I'm on page 50, I think. What am I on? I think I'm on page. Yeah, I'm more on page 52. So right here, this is kind of where I am in the spot, and I'll tell you with comedy what it is. So it says I usually like to milk my birthday for the full 24 hours, and I start celebrating the second it officially begins, but I couldn't do that this year because of the surprise party. That's it might be backwards, at least it's backwards to me, but happy birthday to me, that's kind of what he says right over here. And then we have, here's when the comedy kicks in. You can't really get in trouble on your birthday, so it's a good time to deliver bad news. And I still haven't told my parents about my last report card, and it shows him going woo, like throwing confetti in the air and saying F, C, C, D, B plus, D. But you really have to read it for yourself to really get the comedy, because it's usually the first time you read it, you get a good laugh about it. And this comedy is really kicking in. And usually in the later books you don't get as much as comedy, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, that's kind of the main plot. Other things that I love about this book is it has a lot of, I've already said comedy a couple of times. I said comedy, I mentioned that last clip. But it also has a lot of, like generational, how do I explain this? Like up to date, like information, like how Greg experiences a lot of older people. So you kind of dive into like what his what his lifestyle is like and how it's so relatable, like for like people like Gen Z, Alpha, all that kind of stuff. But also another thing that I found really good is how repetitive it goes back to the earlier books, like 4 through 9, where like they had a lot of like repeating the grandma, Mima, all those kind of things. Like he's getting back into what he did in the earlier books, like the first couple. And I like how they're getting back into that, because the later books are not, and I mentioned this earlier, not as good. So like books 14 through 19 didn't really have comedy, but they did, but it wasn't the type that it wasn't what I was expecting. They're more slow, and they weren't as good as the earlier books. But now we have Partypooper, which is a lot better. And I like that a lot, and that is really, those are like my positives. These are the ranks of what I've done, and that's really kind of what it is. It's really kind of it. I've only read so much, but there's also a lot of not just people, but also things like getting back into like the old jokes. And I do realize that old jokes are like old jokes that they used in previous books are really good and humorous, but as we dive back into them, they're even more funny. They've kind of elaborated, like jokes with Manny on how Greg wants to be a celebrity star, that kind of stuff. And we got into that in the earlier books, but we never really got into that in the later. So that's really good. And those are kind of my positives of the book. I'm going to get into stuff that I did not quite like in the book. So we'll see that next review. But negatives are always very difficult to hand out because there is negatives in this book, but I could say them, and there's a few here. The book is, how I was saying, it's like the old books. It's like the old books. It really has some parts where it isn't like the old books, and it has a pretty slow start. And I know that I'm in the beginning. I know that's ironic that I'm in the beginning. I'm saying it has a slow start. But no, it's like the first 30 pages maybe. It's very slow, and it kind of dives into Greg's mind rather than the plot. And it kind of goes off and dozes off into these different ideas, which I like, but they overuse it. He overuses it, the author. And that's something that I kind of wish to be better, I guess, because that's kind of what's happened in the past couple of books. I did not. That's my least favorite book was probably Hot Mess. As up there, I love No Brainer, but it just depends on the book really. And the later books haven't been really that good, and they've been slow, and that's something that hasn't really changed. But yeah, that's a big negative. But and it also dives into, instead of diving into the plot right away and getting into it. I guess it does. It does get into the plot, but it just slowly craves into the plot, which I don't really like, because the way that they do it is like, or the way that Jeff Kennedy does it is like, you go into action figures, and you go into like when he was younger, which we always go into, we always dive into, but it's in the later books that they overuse it. And they're overusing a lot of things that have been repeated. One thing that I didn't like about Hot Mess, which I'll get for you, 1 second. One thing that I didn't like about it was that never mind. I think my brother's reading it. One thing that I didn't like about Hot Mess is that it really overused The Getaway, I thought. The Getaway. The 12th book. I'm not sure. 13th? No. This is the 13th. Right there. That's the 13th right there. But, it was the 12th. So I didn't really like how it repeated that. You kind of went back to like the same place, and it's like, oh my god, it's basically like they're going to an island and they're doing all that and this. But then again, Hot Mess was funny. It just wasn't my favorite. And I like Partypooper a lot better. But I haven't read the entire thing. It might be the worst book in the world. It might be the best book in the world. You honestly don't really know. So that's kind of where it is. But all right, let's give this baby a rank here. Okay. So I'm going to give you my final rank. This is going to be my final rank here, and what overall I thought was good and bad about it. And I'll tell you why I gave that rank. We'll do 1 out of 100, and then we'll do 1 out of 10. And now I'll tell you why they changed. It's because 1 out of 100 is going to be based on the overall plot, the way it dives in. And 1 out of 10 is going to be based on the comedy and everything, all that jazz, all the other stuff. But the 1 through 100 is going to be based on plot, and I'll tell you why. So let's do the first rank. 1 out of 100. I would give this book an 81 because it has a lot of good stuff, but then again, the plot, it kind of dives into different things, so it's not as good. But overall, it has, at least I didn't give it a 51 or a 61 or a 41, and that kind of stuff. But, that is my 1 out of 100 rank. 1 out of 10, That's a difficult one because I have to go through like the comedy and everything like that, and I think it's really improved. So I'm going to give it a higher score. I am going to give it an 8.9 out of 10, which is like an 89 out of 100. But instead, we're using that kind of stuff because overall, the book was good, and it has this comedy, it has this stuff, but it's still, and I mentioned this earlier, it's still one of the old books, and I'm only 12, so it's hard to compare. Like, I haven't read those books. I didn't read the early books when they came out because they came out in 2005, God knows what. But and I've read them several times. But I know that for a fact that those books are a lot better. And yeah, that's my review for Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Partypooper. I will send out an extended review on this because extended reviews are always really good. But I'll give it an extended once I'm done with this book. And I'll finish this in like 3 days, by the way, because I just whiz through this kind of stuff. But overall, this book was an amazing book, and I think it has, went over the level from any book. I think it's one of the best so far, but we'll see because it might change. And go in the comment section down below and say how you thought about the book or how you think about the book because I haven't even finished it. No spoilers, please. Thank you very much. Subscribe to my channel.